Hey,
Hey,
how are you doing?
good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Just give me 1 second. I'm just gonna plug my headphones in.
Rock and roll.
All set. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. How are you?
I'm good. How you been? Busy?
Doing really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, really well. I was thinking back to last time we spoke. Uh, I was also sitting on the floor, but in a different room, in my home, and had just started the YouTube channel. And I was telling a friend that I was doing this with you, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of like they were like, what kind of content does he make? And I was like, it's kind of like a brother channel. I was like, he's
Oh,
spoken to the most detransitioners, and I was just kind of yeah, speaking fondly of you as a kind of brother channel. And it's just yeah, it's been a great year.
yeah. So where were you a year ago? You had just started the channel.
I had left the blue state of New York to move to the red state of Texas,
Oh, yeah.
and I had lost pretty much all my friends, um, mostly from my stance on the trans stuff, but also due to my kind of understanding and questioning of the dominant COVID um, narrative. And so that was kind of like the final straw. And when we spoke last, I guess I was just starting to kind of picture how to alchemize all those experiences. And that was the kind of impetus for the channel, and working with women who were kind of in that process of unpacking all of their discomfort around trans ideology, around pornography, around prostitution, around surrogacy, around industrialized birthing practices, coming to terms with their birth trauma. So um, the things that were taboo in my kind of sphere for a while, um, and so that brings us to now, which is just working with women as they work through all the sticky shit.
Birth is kind of sticky, right? So you're still in the same general business.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if I said this last time we spoke, but one thing that I love about, or what I felt like used to be so just inevitable about birth, is there's very little room for apathy. It is like the most grounding, or can be, if it's undisturbed, the most grounding, tactile, material experience that one might have in their entire life, whether that's the woman giving birth or the witnesses in the space. There is a demand for complete presence, and it can be, of course, esoteric and kind of a spiritual experience, of course, but as a birth keeper, as a witness, there's no confusion over who is giving birth, how they're giving birth,
What
whether
is
they're
giving
supported
birth?
in the birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is being born. um so yes, birth can feel sticky. It can also feel very can also be smooth. It can be slippery. It can be all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This might be a improper question, but I'm just thinking, well, you don't have to answer that. Have you had children?
No, no. It's so funny. Everyone always hesitates and is awkward in asking me that, and I don't really understand why. I imagine it's because some women are infertile, or long to be mothers and can't for various reasons. But um, I got into this work when I was 24. I'm 30 now. I will have children, but no, I have not. I have not given birth.
Well, I bring that up because I wonder to what extent you not having given birth informs or makes it makes you aware of an ignorance from your experience to that experience, and how you've navigated that, and what kind of lessons you've learned to bridge that gap.
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly can't deny the fact that I haven't given birth, influences how I show up for women. And I think, on the one hand, I have not been through that rite of passage. And on the other hand, because I'm a maiden, I am very available in the sense that I have the emotional space. In a practical sense, I'm available. Um, I'm, in my youth still very youthful in my body that I can, skip a night of sleep and be so energized from, this incredible birth that I, have adrenaline for, the next few weeks. Um, but yes, I think being so entrenched in kind of a leftist feminist world, there is a lot of um, mystery around birth, and also I think pain and fear around birth so much that um, I've met a number of women recently who had exclusively heard just horror stories around birth, that is ultimately, they said that is why they never had kids, either their mother's traumatic birth stories, or friends, or friends they have who work in labor and delivery wards. um, and so, yeah, as a young maiden who serves women in birth, it is um, a privilege to be able to talk to other maidens about what is possible outside of the industrial birth system, what is possible, um, what it really means to like make a choice in your birth. um,
Are you saying that you're a proselytizer of pregnancy?
a proselytizer of pregnancy.
It's not that bad, guys.
Well, this is what I'll say. Pregnancy and birth is not inherently traumatic. It's the social, conditions and the lack of support that so many women feel, and information. The lack of information around pregnancy and birth, and what physiologic birth is, and the importance of the mother-baby dyad, and breastfeeding. I think that um, that leads both men and women to believe that it's really bad. And so it can be really bad. It is really bad for most women. I don't want to kind of not emphasize that, but yeah, I think I am doing my best to offer what is possible, and what I see. And I think the ultimate medicine is obviously the women who are giving birth in their power, who then share their stories. That's unarguable, rather than me sharing from my perspective as the birth keeper.
That term, maiden, I did not expect to hear from somebody, I'm sorry to say, your age. Or it seems like an archaic term, or even problematic. Why do you embrace that term?
Mm. Well, I read and kind of talk frequently on the maiden, mother, crone kind of archetypes.
Okay, yeah.
And I think it's through my understanding of female physiology and um, you know uh, spellcraft and altar making, that those terms seem to bubble up. So it's only that word has only become part of my vernacular, I'd say, in the past like 2 years. And I bring it up because when I think of the word maiden, I think of a woman who has so much ahead of her, but also has so much to do in her maidenhood, in terms of service, in terms of, like doulas who are maidens, or midwives who are maidens, for example. the essential part of our role in society, to care for the mothers, so that when we become mothers, there are maidens to care for us. So I love it because I don't see it, in isolation. I see it as part of the kind of rite of passage. And I mean, obviously, the aunties are important. Not to say that it's that a woman's, karmic duty is to also pass through the line of mother, but there's something that maidenhood that feels a bit enchanting as well.
You developed this, or you've allowed this terminology, this triad, to influence and organize your relationship to the female, to the woman, and to everything that contains. Speaking as a man, there are different relationships that a man has to the maiden and to the mother and to the crone, and negotiating and navigating those relationships and codifying them, not in a very hard-coded way, but in the form of stories and archetypes. That, I'm sorry to say, is kind of what I think of as the good gender. That's kind of the gender that is fruitful and narrative based, as opposed to gender that's strict and stereotypical. And so entering into a discussion about the maiden and the mother and the crone, and then I guess the three stages of the man, the crone, the codger, and the father.
I don't even know what the words would be. Honestly, it's so out of my periphery. I don't even consider.
But I just wonder, even though you are enmeshed and really focusing on womankind, I'm wondering if there is advice or perspectives that you have for men on how to honor the maiden and the mother and the crone, and what you notice is the proper way in the relationships that you found. And
that's a great question. So in the context of birth, we'll just use that example. I think what women need, and this is, kind of paraphrased from one of my mentors, named Yolanda Norris Clark. She has nine children. She's been in birth work for 20 plus years, and she says that what women need are men to be in service to them in birth, not on board, not to be convinced, right? But to be in service to. So what that means is recognizing that the woman is the authority in birth. So operating, right, if you're operating from that core belief that the woman is the authority in her birth experience, then what else could you do other than be in service to? And that's how I operate as a birth keeper. But a lot of women that I've worked with or known will resist, will not end up having the birth of their dreams, a home birth, a birth in the safety of their home, in the privacy of their home, for failure to, get their husbands on board, right? So if that is what you're convinced that you need as the pregnant woman to have your birth, then that's a lost cause. But if you operate from the lens of, I'm an authority, and again, this is only going to work if you're not in an abusive relationship. If the man is withholding money and support, then you're in a shitstorm. So that's one way that I think is really, but again, recovering that trust in women is a big task. I think women themselves are starting to remember, and this is a process, to remember that they that there is a wisdom to our bodies, that there is a wisdom to pregnancy and birth, that there is a wisdom to healing. Even the way that we think about bleeding and blood. It's, postpartum or during miscarriage or abortion termination, is that we are scared. A lot of women are scared or afraid of their blood outside of menstruation. And so remembering that even when we bleed, whether that's after birth or during a miscarriage or during a termination, that there is a wisdom to that. Now, of course, there is a line where, we might seek medical attention, but there's so much space in between, the we've lost really the being able to determine and listen and make decisions for ourselves in birth and postpartum, and outsourcing answers to what we should do or what is necessary. And so that doesn't mean that we don't seek counsel or consult for issues as they arrive that we have questions about. But I'm also, it's funny you asked that question about men in service, because or how men can relate to women in that way, because I'm in this 2-year matriarchal societies course with Haida Abendroth. I don't know if you know her. And in an egalitarian society, in a matriarchal society, the men who are doing the most kind of support and who are in service to the women are always their biological relatives, right? So their uncles, their fathers, their brothers, their cousins, and their male partner, their romantic sexual partner, is a part of their life, but they come and go. Like the relationship is almost exclusively an emotional and romantic relationship. So when that man, let's say that romance ends, that's all that ends. She doesn't lose her house. She doesn't lose, caretakers for her children. She doesn't lose her material goods, which is kind of a roundabout, point or answer to your question. What would it look like for us to move into more of egalitarian society? Now, yeah, the thought of like your brother being your like ride or die, or your dad or your uncle, like most women can't relate to. So yeah, that was just another thing I've been thinking about recently. How can we strengthen the bonds within a biological, in a bloodline, man to woman versus, just in a romantic context.
That is interesting. I haven't had that thought experiment proposed to me. And we're at a advanced stage in our society, just being in the modern times, industrialization, mobility, and then the financial stresses that come with that, and the reordering of all of these, I guess, the concept of property and capital. And we're in a very complex state right now. And maybe what allowed us to do that was the modularity of marriage being the primary unit of society. Like the home, the man and the woman, the monogamous family is the primary unit from which everything else was, maybe, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, maybe everything was conceptualized that way, and then kind of it was taken even further with the concept of the individual, and then modern liberalism kind of comes from, and the Enlightenment thought comes from that. And there's a lot of really fascinating critiques of liberalism and the individual that don't necessarily go full. I mean, the state being the main unit of society, but rather reorganizing it around the concept of birth and of caregiving and what that entails. So, long ramble short, thinking of it in terms, if you want to call it egalitarian society or matriarchal society, thinking in terms of a bloodline, and that is the central domain or the central unit. And then the male and female relationships are, I guess the taboo of incest keeps the romantic and the sexual thing focused outward, and how the males and females across generations plug into each other. But having the idea of, I guess, property, and not property in a completely materialistic sense, but as we share ownership and service of one another, I belong to you, you belong to me, that kind of property. I mean, building that up. That's just an interesting thought experiment. And I don't know how we would get to that, to go back to that place, but starting with an idea, a core idea, I guess a core value of service and of care, that I think is the way forward for a egalitarian society. And then maybe a division of responsibilities, that again is loose. It's not stereotypical. The woman isn't supposed to do this one thing, the man isn't supposed to do this other thing, but kind of an understanding that women have certain proclivities specifically with regards to birth and probably caregiving, generally speaking, that men don't have natural proclivities for. Men might have other proclivities, and being able to just accept those general distribution, and then kind of building wisdom, and then having conversations that elicit the understanding of the wisdom, like you were saying, of motherhood and of the female, and allowing for men to understand that, and then also allowing women to respect and therefore expect certain qualities from men, and then to be able to build those qualities up in one another.
Yeah. I mean, one of the like, in an egalitarian society, from what I understand, with these modern and ancient matriarchal societies, like the case studies, the societies that she lived with, are still around today. And they all center women and mothers, not because they're feminist, but because they see the clan thrive. This is how they see the clan thrive. This is the sustainability of the clan, is to center women and mothers. So when I say the word matriarchy, often, and I had this reaction too when I was, didn't know anything about it. I had a kind of inverse. I was like, oh, that just means like more women in Congress and like more female CEOs. No, it's not. It's not the inverse of patriarchy. But it just makes so much sense, given the way that I see, just in a kind of microcosm, the women that I support, when they have their needs met in pregnancy and birth, when they are supported, in their marriage, when their families come into town to be with them, to support them, like everyone. I mean, this is like multi-generational healing happening. I mean, just if you take a woman birthing in her power and her mother hearing that story and knowing that that's possible, I mean, that's healing just between that mother and that daughter. So it's no surprise to me that this would be the case within these groups. One thing that was so shocking that I've learned, and again, I've just started this program. I'm not a matriarchal scholar yet. But one of the things, people, so in the group, people were so eager to know, was there rape? Is there rape in these matriarchal societies? And according to Heide, no. Because what would happen? Well, first of all, everyone just like likes and loves the women. Like there isn't, that's the first thing. The women are mothered, the women are valued. And if that were to happen, that man would be put in like isolation, like just totally exiled from the clan, which is a death sentence. It is the ultimate rejection, like horror, like beyond, it's worse than death to be isolated, to just be like left in the forest somewhere. So I felt, and I think I wasn't alone in this. We were all kind of in disbelief. No. She must be romanticizing these clans. She must be, we must not get, this must be some kind of exoticization of these societies, of this clan living. But from what I've read and understand so far, this is true, which is just inconceivable, I think, in modern society. In our modern society?
Well, there's kind of a dual question. I guess one is, to what degree does psychopathy not exist? And you're like, well, it's got to exist. I mean, people get wired in very strange ways. That's not going to stop happening. To what extent it's focused or directed away or outward from the clan by the mores, the morality and the ethics of the clan, to direct that psychopathy outward. So then you might have problems that come up with that. But also there might be an open question of to what degree the integration of the woman and the respect for the woman diminishes certain forms of psychopathy or antisocial behavior, let's say, in society. And you'd say, well, probably just because of Pareto distribution, to quote Camille Paglia, you don't have a woman Mozart because you don't have a woman Jack the Ripper. There's just a distribution. There's a lot more genius men and moron men. Women tend to have less of a outliers and more of a grouping in the middle. So it's a question of how those kind of the outliers with hyper-violent men and then hyper-genius men are the opposite of violent, to what degree the mores of the society can capitalize and minimize the negative aspects of psychopathy that would pop up specifically in men just because of the way that evolution has crafted our sexes.
Right. And the same goes for suicide. They don't have suicide.
Why do you think that? I mean, we can just guess. I mean, what would diminish suicide?
A fulfilled life, a contented life, responsibilities, tasks. I think like tasks are so underrated in terms of what they like the satisfaction of completing tasks. I think, like I sometimes, this is a silly example, but sometimes I order groceries, online, and they show up miraculously outside my door. Totally different experience than walking a mile to my grocery store and spending time with what I'm picking out. And even that is such a disconnected experience, going to the grocery store. It's not like I'm picking food off of my land or something. But eliminating those tasks, those kind of basic tasks of just gathering your food in this very kind of like manufactured, already kind of artificial environment, but certainly not as bad as getting them delivered to your door. Yeah. So I would say, a contented life, joy, nature. These are the egalitarian societies are land-based. Matriarchal societies are land-based societies. So there's a kind of a ritual to everything.
That brings up the question, to what degree can the modern world re-engineer an egalitarian, connected society? And I don't even think, there was something really interesting that you said, that this isn't feminist. This isn't, at least this is not like liberal feminism or activistic feminism. This is an American feminism. This is matriarchy. This is another value set that is outside of political discourse. So we study, where does that arise? Where does it thrive? What are the limitations of it? Because I'm sure it's got limitations and faults to it. And then to what degree can our disconnected, immediate, virtual society begin to reconstruct it in this environment? And if we can't, does that mean, is it a value to deconstruct modern society and go back to the land in order to achieve this? So if we just leave beside dismantling society to achieve this thing that we don't know, what are some inroads that you've seen that are possible for us to begin to establish the connection to this more holistic and meaningful version of society?
Oh, this is such a hard question, and I asked this in the course, and everyone immediately, it's such a natural thing to want to do, to say, wow, that sounds great. That sounds like it works. How can I pluck and bring that into here? And what I love so much about Haida is that she is truly an anthropologist. She says, like, I am not here to tell you or teach you how to recreate this. I am simply here to tell you my observations
Okay.
and my research. So,
I respect
I
that.
mean, the biggest issue is that with matriarchal societies, it's a closed circuit. The economy works in a closed circuit. So, take what we have now, which is globalization. I think the closest I could imagine to, the kind of land-based um, lives would be, but again, not matriarchal necessarily, like the kibbutzim, living in community, sharing resources, collectively, raising each other's children, um, pooling your resources in that way. Now, I don't particularly want to do that. Like I'm quite entrenched in my apartment and my
Your
life,
schedule and
my schedule. I work with women all over the world online.
mm-hmm.
Like, like I am not ready to give up my transhumanist flares, really is what they are.
Hmm.
I think, and I talked to Jennifer Billick about this, and, it's easy to say like, those are the transhumanists, those are the bad guys, but we have all adapted.
I'm all
Yeah,
plugged in. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, this has been my biggest takeaway from women in my life who are modeling this, and also kind of what I've learned from the course so far is what is possible when women have devoted partners. So what happens when women are centered in their work? What is it like? What is that? What are the possibilities there? Um, what can maybe, perhaps the antidote is, female entrepreneurship, but not like going to work every day, being the CEO of a corporation. Like what could that look like? And so the work that I'm doing now and the way that I'm, what I'm building towards is some variation of that, so that when I have children, I either have, passive income sources, or have built up enough of a clientele and following that I can take the time that I need off, to be with my children. But this idea of like giving up my work to have kids, like that's just not for me. And so how can that work? And I think really the only way would be to have kind of a live-in support, whether that's your mother or your sisters or a devoted partner, who's, in their genius of cooking or homesteading or homeschooling the kid, whatever that looks like. Mm-hmm. So it's not cut and dry, but yeah. So I've been thinking about that. And again, I'm lucky enough to have women in my life who have been modeling that for me to even imagine what that could look like.
It reminds me of what Mary Harrington has been playing around with in her critique of liberalism and modernism and all the relationships and the society and the ethos and the mores that are impacting us negatively, even though they've unlocked a magnificent amount of potential. They still have left a lot of what we are behind, or tried to, and that stuff is constantly breathing down our necks. And she was mentioning an idea of like laptop homesteading, where a pair bond could work with just laptops in the woods, and there's some sort of integration between the entire modern structure, and yet just going back to a very simple life that produces humans. Like that would be the goal or the orientation. I really do think that children are the orientation for so much of what it is to be an adult, or to really become a human being. Dealing with children, working with children, birthing children, raising children, all of that stuff is very integral to self-discovery, to self-mastery, to talk about tasks. If you want some tasks, hang out with a 2-year-old
Yeah.
for a day.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be your children
Yeah.
either. It doesn't have to be your children. I mean, but yes, I agree that that's quite a tax. Oh my gosh, I had this conversation with a friend recently, where she was saying how it's like culturally acceptable to say that you don't like children. It's like the only class of people who it's socially acceptable to say that you don't like, whereas if you were like, I don't like special needs people, or I don't like old people, or I don't like teenagers, there's something about the popularity of saying that you don't like kids that
Hmm.
is, I think, just a symptom of, the way that we see, their value, like we, like in the most kind of negative sense. I think the takers, the money suckers,
Hmm.
the draining
The
ones,
burdens. Yeah.
the burdens, exactly. And I know that that is the reality of most people's lives. Like they cannot sustain big families because of, the lack of support around building
Yeah.
a family.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
just thought of that.
No, and you brought that up earlier in your pregnancy proselytization. Sorry. I'm fond of the alliteration, but there is it's not so much the transhumanism, it's the anti-natalism that's
Yes.
evinced in certain forms of transhumanism. It's the disrespect, or not even disrespect, but the not honoring of our bodies that is manifested specifically in the uptick of trans ideology and gender ideology, and the
Mm-hmm.
dissociation of that. And
Mm-hmm.
then what's being taught in schools to kids about how they're becoming more and more sexualized, and kind of being prepared to become some sort of sex worker, just
Mm-hmm.
by planting all these ideas in it. There's this drive in the schools, it seems like, or this zeitgeist to rob the children of the innocence, and then also kind of look down on children and say, well, you don't really matter other than you're a sexual and being, or you're a productive being, or you can work and you're smart, or something like that. It's not, we're disrespecting the body, we're disrespecting the child, and we in turn are disrespecting ourselves. We're no longer connected to our ancestors, and to
Mm-hmm.
motherhoods, and to a
Mm-hmm.
real a beneficial patriarchy, like just an understanding and an honoring of what men bring to the table, and having that in conjunction with the understanding and honoring of what women bring to the table. All of that network of where we come from, it pops up in this anti-natalism, and then this fear of
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy, and
Mm-hmm.
the cutting out of that very huge piece of life, which is what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, being birth and
Yeah.
child rearing that subsequently
Yeah.
follows.
Yeah. I think I've been thinking a lot about mind control
Hmm.
with, obviously with trans identity, transgender ideology, and also body image, by extension,
Hmm.
that women know very well. Um, I don't know if you know this, but I do hypnosis. I'm a hypnotist as well.
Hmm.
And I
That
used to
explains
think
why
of,
our first conversation, I don't remember anything. All of a sudden, it was on my channel, and I'm like, what happened there?
well, I feel like all good interviews, you kind of go into a trance state. I feel like as the interviewee, as the guest, I think that's actually a marker of a great conversation, is to lose
Flow.
track of time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Um,
Mind control,
Mind control. Yeah.
body
Just
image.
what is available to, this is what I've been thinking about recently. What is available to women, and what became available to me once I was able to release myself from vicious thought patterns and cycles, which is, inherent and fundamental to the obsession and delusion that you are stuck in the wrong body. right? There is no space for anything else. And the goal, right, as you know, becomes to get access to the wrong sex hormones, to get the surgery, for everyone to call you by your chosen name. Like that is the obsession. And the illusion is that it will be quenched by the things, but it isn't, and I think there's something, there's a shorter cycle when you think of something like binge eating, which was my flavor of mind control. The amount of time that I spent thinking about what I would eat next, where I would eat it, how much I would eat, and then after how much I would restrict, and then do it all over again. What I needed to arrange to make this happen. Like it really was like a mind virus. I honestly think back to that time and wonder how I got anything done. And I wasn't really getting much done. I was operating at a kind of a sub level. And I think one
What
of the
age were
ways
you during this?
this was, I would say it was the worst in college, and then like probably till I was about, up to 26.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was really, really bad, but I just adapted, I think, and that's kind of what most women do who have, or men who are stuck in these thought patterns. And so what that looks like long term is, not being able to meet your goals. Now, this is assuming that the people that we're talking about have their basic needs met, right? Who aren't living in a literal scarcity, right? So, yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about what is possible when, again, my work is almost exclusively with women, when women are able to free up their minds to release those patterns. I mean, you can think about it with like a drug addict or an alcoholic, to what their lives become, how transformative their lives, are when they're able to release and address those kind of core issues.
How did you go about rewriting that code that you were stuck in?
I tried a lot of, I failed with, using cognitive behavioral therapy. I had a kind of, I had a therapist for many years and kind of on and off, who took my insurance, and it was kind of like Freudian-ish style. Just, she did very little talking. It was a lot of just like what you would imagine, like a little notebook. And then I think I ended that and just felt so desperate that I kind of on a whim booked a hypnosis session. I thought, what do I have to lose? Like, I'm been doing this for 10 years. What? On and off since kind of started around high school. It does for most, like the puberty, preteen kind of years. And that one session lasted me about a year. I didn't binge eat for a full year after that single session. But I started binging again. Not as severe. The frequency went way down. But because it's food, because you can't just do away with it forever, I found that, in my journey, I needed more kind of integrative coaching in addition to hypnosis. So in my practice, I've had great results from, one-off sessions working with people for things that you can quit forever, or like fears, fear of heights, stuff like that. But when it comes to food, there's a lot more to kind of work through because it doesn't go away. You have to keep eating.
Is there something in the and this is such a complex topic when we speak about people's negative thought patterns or neuroses or whatever is the right word for that, but because it's related to not just food, but it's related to your digestive system. It's something that is kind of boiling in there and talking to you all the time and reminding you, and you have to clean up and you have to prepare for it and you have to manage this
Hmm.
whole thing. You can't get, you can fast for a few weeks every now and then, but the relationship to being a hungering and devouring and shitting creature might
Hmm.
be like so ripe with fear and not being able to control this thing. There's a lot of questions that open up when it's the relationship to that part of the human being, that animal that you are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you mean by integrative? And I wonder if that integrating
Hmm.
that beast into your consciousness or something, if that's what you mean by that.
Um, I mean, using modalities kind of outside of cognitive behavioral therapy and kind of Freudian kind of style of therapy, and also, outside of like licensing, like talking to someone who can really speak freely. And
Hmm.
I was lucky enough to work with people who, regardless of their licensing, could speak freely and could speak honestly. And I find that it's a lot of issues with the women who come to me are leaving therapists who are gaslighting them about, trans ideology, for example. So I think, to be more specific, um, I really have drawn a lot of wisdom, and I use from a set of tools called the conscious leadership tools. It's a rebranding, kind of a bunch of other kind of modalities, but the way that they talk about, um, a frame of living and thinking, I found particularly helpful. So like one thing that really stands out is, and this happens in neurolinguistic programming, it's called parts therapy. With the conscious leadership tools, it's called persona play.
Hmm.
So it's, the summary is, kind of allying with the parts of you that
Hmm.
seem to want to hurt you, but are actually there to protect you.
Hmm. Hmm.
So an example that I'll use for smoking will be, there's like a guilt and shame cycle that happens with binge eating, also with cigarette smoking, where the smoker knows that if they continue to do this, they are likely to, get a heart attack, stroke, lung cancer, all the slew of health complications that result in smoking like industrialized, cigarettes. Um, and so then the thought often becomes, well, why am I doing this to myself? Why would I do this to myself? Why am I hurting the people around me? Why am I modeling this kind of thing? And so the reframing, with the kind of parts integration or kind of persona play is, how is this part of you? How is the smoker there to protect you? What was its function when you first began smoking? And for most, it's to fit in,
Hmm.
to ease their awkwardness, to ease their nervousness.
Hmm.
I had a brief experience with smoking cigarettes, in college, and I did it and I was studying abroad at the time, and I remember really getting it. I remember saying, "Whoa, my social life really improved from smoking cigarettes for 3 months because everyone was smoking where I was."
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, there's an entry, for taking breaks together and
Hmm.
asking for a cigarette and a lighter and whatever. Um, so yeah, that's part of the kind of integration, kind of like tools that I think are literally integrating the parts of ourselves that seem to be disconnected,
Yeah.
and kind of not allied.
There is a growing phenomena which might be better than the gender ideology in a certain respect, because I don't know if they're medicalizing themselves yet, and maybe the medical establishment isn't necessarily on this particular bandwagon, but it's called DIDS, or dissociative identity disorder. It's all the rage. It's really fascinating.
Oh my gosh, I literally just spoke to a woman. I'm putting out the episode
Oh,
next week
oh, great.
about this.
Excellent. So
I
people
love that
can
you
go
brought
and
this up.
watch. People can go watch this for a deeper dive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny that you brought this up. Yes. Yes. That and also what she talks about in the interview is what it's like to be in a relationship with someone. So basically what happened to her is she was in a relationship with a man who thought he was a woman who developed DID, or perhaps it was there before, and then she developed
Oh,
DID
oh,
to
okay.
combat his abuse. So like one example of that is he would be, she had one personality that was like zero bullshit, you can't gaslight me.
Yeah.
And so that could kind of come up. And then when she was afraid that he was going to be violent, she would become the little baby, the little child who he, would kind of stop himself from hurting because it's a child.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's
and
wild.
then
Yeah.
she said that she ultimately healed from allying with all the personalities, starting to fully integrate them into her being rather than say, no, you're not here. No, you're not here. Like, go away. Like, you're hurting me. Like, um,
Hmm.
wow, full circle. Yeah, that's so funny that you brought that up.
It's, I mean, I played with that literally. I broke my persona up into different characters, and then but it was a game that I
Mm-hmm.
played with literature, and I can see how it's very. There's actually this book I read in the late '90s called "When Rabbit Howls," and it was printed, I think, in the early '80s when this was a big thing to have
Mm-hmm.
during the Satanic Panic and then the dissociative identity, multiple personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big craze, but the book is just insanely, it was just so enthralling and powerful and seductive because and plus it was we don't know to what extent the woman was lying or not, or if it's a work of fiction or not, because she turned up things really high, like where she'd walk into a department store and all the TVs would start short circuiting, because her brain was like so powerful, and then she gets into the past with the terrible, horrible abuse. But it was just an interesting thought experiment to say, okay, well, this is this person and this is that person, and then this is how they all work together. And I can see
Mm-hmm.
how it's really addictive. I mean, it's great narrative framework, but also when it becomes a belief system or something, when we take on, I don't know what to call this, but it's not necessarily progressive politics, but it happens within progressive circles. And I think it has to do with the value of affirmation and
Mm-hmm.
how identity, whether it's gender or mental health, all these things are affirmed. You're supposed to affirm your autism. You're supposed to affirm your disability, and so within those environments or that way of thinking, these these glitches or these thought forms or these thought ideas they become a part of the ideology. They become something like, well, you have to respect this, and they're cemented,
Mm-hmm.
and any sort of question around that is looked on as bigotry,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of tools developed to restrict any sort of skepticism or exploration of that. But when we get to something like DIDS, and then you find the communities online with all these kids, with all these, they're basically just theater kids that are just working on all their impressions, and they have 50 accents, and maybe there's more to it. I haven't covered it because maybe there's more to
Yeah.
it. But when you spoke about persona play, that's what made me
Mm-hmm.
think of that, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how that can be good and can get really ridiculous really quick. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering, to what
Mm-hmm.
degree is there a clinical or an objectivist or just some sort of remove from the fact that you are kind of metaphorically speaking about this part of yourself, the smoker?
Mm-hmm.
Where did it come from? Who
Mm-hmm.
is that? What is that? Or something like that. And then kind of using that metaphor to break down. It doesn't make the metaphor stick. That's not the process or the pursuit. It's to break it down and to accept, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to see, simple terms, like to see the positive intention behind the actions,
Yeah.
right? So even if it's causing outward harm, like smoking cigarettes or self-sabotaging
Mm.
behaviors, there's always a positive intention. And so locating that and then finding where you can kind of reorient. So like in the case of binge eating, what I experience and a lot of women experience with binge eating is just a sense of freedom. Like you go into a trance state, you're a kid in a candy store. All of a sudden you can have, it doesn't matter what you ate during the day. A lot of women will binge at night. Doesn't matter what you ate during the day, the night is yours. You get to have whatever you want. There's no limitation, right?
Hmm.
And what that says, what I experience and what I see other women experience is, desiring that space where you can feel freedom, where you don't have to think, right? Where your mind can relax and turn off. Because, I mean, I would black out. Like, I would not remember the things that I had eaten, and 3 hours would go by. This
Hmm.
was the craving,
Hmm.
literally craving the foods that made me feel very sick. But the positive intention was, yeah, wanting to not think about all the hard things all the time, to feel a sense of a little bit loss of control too,
Hmm.
right? I could go the whole day with my tasks and then have this time to just let loose, but it was hurting me.
Hmm.
So finding ways that I can be that I can be childlike without, destroying my body and my gastrointestinal, tract and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So yeah, there is, um, yeah,
So it's finding safe, secure, and specialized orgies to participate in. It's just like,
orgies.
orgy, just orgiastic. I'm not using the specific sexual connotation of the term. The term means just a complete Dionysian,
Yes.
orgiastic,
Yes.
revelatory moment. So finding
Exactly.
and controlling. It's like, okay, well, I need that. So where can I direct that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's also worth noting that I mean, this isn't like it's just the thought has just come to me that we as women have to always think about our safety, like
Hmm. There's always a risk
there.
analysis going on.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I was just talking to this guy I know who
Hmm.
wakes up at 4:30 every morning and goes to watch the light patterns at a nearby water source from 5 in the morning, dark, to the sunrise. And I just thought, I would never do that. I would never go alone to an empty body of water, where no one is there, and sit there alone for hours with my eyes closed. That sounds beautiful, and I want to do that with someone, but just what freedom. I mean, I imagine that he experiences such a deep level of freedom and kind of enchantment in that experience. And
Hmm.
so yeah, having this kind of container where I know I'm safe from like predators or abuse, but
Hmm.
can kind of let loose in these parameters is it was weird. And I have to say that another component of my experience was that I would do it when I was babysitting. And so I was getting paid. So there was something about the me getting money that felt like I wasn't totally losing out. Like I wasn't a total degenerate, because while I was making myself feel sick, I was earning money.
Hmm.
So there was still that part of me of like, you can't totally like go off the rails. Like you can't just do this for free.
Hmm.
And of course the children were asleep and everyone was safe and there was no like whatever. But yeah, this desire to be childlike is yeah, the positive intention there. And this is the case for every, I think, negative, behavior. I mean, um, fear of heights, like nail biting, all the things, claustrophobia. Um, there's almost always, a positive intention behind it.
You brought up well in the terms of what we're speaking about. Therapy means healing, and then earlier on when we were talking about birthing, you brought up
Mm-hmm.
the story or the image of a daughter going through birth, and then the mother witnessing that and being brought back to when that occurred in their relationship. And how healing is a part of that, and what healing's role is with regard to birth is it opens up the question of how we define healing, because is birth a wound, is birth a
Hmm.
trauma, or is there something else? Is healing, or how you're using healing, different than a band-aid or a suture or some different
Mm.
stance towards this difficulty or this I
Hmm.
guess you can't get away from. I think it's fair to say that birthing can be pretty probably traumatic. I think if there's anything that probably is kind of a difficulty or a rite of passage that's pretty freaking powerful, it would be passing a child through yourself into the world. But I don't mean to denigrate it, but I'm just saying that there's no reason to not say that it, or to demean trauma in the way that it has just become kind of
Mm.
a way that we just speak about anything that's difficult to us. I think that birth
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
hold up its own on difficulty meters. But how does
Hmm.
healing, or what do you mean by healing? What is the definition of
Mm.
healing?
Well, I think in this case, it's individualistic. I mean, it's happening on a micro level, right? So, like, if you're talking about a mother kind of seeing what her daughter is capable of, and the birth being beautiful and safe and private. Um,
Hmm.
I think that how I don't understand. I don't see how it couldn't reinforce um, the power of the body and the wisdom of the body, or the miraculousness of the female body.
And therefore
So
an integration, or
yeah,
an embracing of what it is to be a woman, and
well, I think
or
kind of understanding that maybe what happened to the grandmother in that case in her birth wasn't necessary, and that the grief that she experienced, the longing, the void that she
oh, are you saying
experienced by
perhaps in an industrial setting where the baby
yes,
was right away snatched from her? Okay,
yeah,
okay, yeah, okay.
assuming she, let's say she was even put under general anesthesia, like in the case of my grandmother, not even getting to see the baby be born, and knowing that
Hmm.
that was a kind of theft, so even the being validated in the longing and the grief around the loss of that, I think is important, because most women are just told to be happy that they have a healthy baby, and it could have been worse, and thank God it wasn't that, and so there's a kind of a suppressing of the but I wanted to be the first one to touch my baby. I wanted to be the one to see the sex of the baby first, or I really regret there being strangers seeing me naked, putting a shining light from the ceiling straight on my yoni, like whatever their kind of hold up and discomfort around what happened.
Hmm.
So I think on a kind of a more individual level, like that's what's possible. Does it fix the systemic issues? Does it change the fact that still, I think it's like upwards of 97, 98% of women in the US will give birth in a hospital? No. Um,
But it's still healing, or it's integrative when it happens under the correct conditions. And I really,
mhm,
I was going to ask you what you mean by private, and I think it has something to do
mhm.
with all those strangers. Like you bring up the concept of privacy. Why is that important, and what are the conditions for privacy? What do you mean by privacy?
Well, I I would say not just privacy, but privacy in one's own home. So the space where, their bacteria is everywhere. They're
Huh.
kind of colonized, the
That's weird. I never
mhm.
thought of my home as like my extended biome, but I guess it is,
Yes,
right? So
100%.
yeah, okay.
100%. And like the baby, like, has been in your home for 10 months before they're born.
Yeah,
They know the humming of the fan, obviously, muzzled and
yeah.
rearranged through what they hear inside the womb, but um the temperature, the sounds, the movement, we move differently based on where we are when
Yeah.
we're outside our home, like when I lived in New York City on the subway, I became this like tight little closed, like my nervous system was on overdrive, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We move differently, we breathe differently based on our environment and the people we are around, right? And the privacy element is, again, to create a sense of safety. I think when most people are naked, they want to be in private. It's very weird that anyone would feel safe butt naked in a room with strangers. I don't care if it's called a hospital. That doesn't change. The body doesn't know that. The conscious mind doesn't know, oh, but it's a hospital. I should feel fine here. All the body knows is, what we experience as, mammals, which is that mammals give birth best and, safely undisturbed. Like we treat zoo animals better with more dignity when they give birth than we teach birthing women. The zookeepers know not to touch the animals, not to go near them. Now, are they observing them? Are they still under surveillance? Yes. I'm not an advocate for that either. But, they are not prodded and poked and spoken to. I mean, when was the last date? On average, how many drinks did you have pre-pregnancy? Yeah. Like what? These are the kinds of questions.
Advocating for like a birthing preserve. Every state's got 50 acres of land where the women just go and they just do their thing. Nobody touches them. No. They come out of the field.
I don't think so. I think leaving the home is important if the home is not safe. Like if there is an abusive partner, if there isn't clean running water, like obviously there would be a better place than that. But
all things being equal, so the notion of private isn't just it does take into account of who and who you're surrounded by, the environment, but there's something about being in belonging, I guess, might be, or just the system of belonging and the feeling of belonging that would be affecting the body, which is doing most of the work in that moment. And if we want to let it do its thing the best, we give it, we diminish the distractions, the risks, and you're saying that the environment's very important to that.
Very much. Yeah. And this is why I used to teach a program called hypnobirthing.
Oh.
And that was all about changing your mind in the industrial birth setting.
Okay.
And it mitigated harm. I'll give it that. It mitigated harm. But the woman's mind wasn't the problem. Did I share pain relieving techniques? Did it reduce the number of epidurals? Yes. But the solution, again, isn't in the mind. As I said, it really is in the environment. And so once the environment is made safe and private, when she chooses that, she can roar, she can yell. She doesn't need to do hypnosis. Right? It can help. She can still visualize and, calm her breathing. And certainly that might help some women, but it's not essential because we've addressed the core issue, which is that you are birthing in an industrialized environment. And so you might be able to control a little more because you have these pain relieving techniques, but the dark side of that is teaching dissociation. I had women that I supported go so deep within in the context of hospital births that trauma could ensue, or kind of a disorder could ensue without them being super aware, or they would say things like, I can have another vaginal exam, because their body was so open and released that perhaps the thought of a full fist going inside them wasn't as scary as someone who's scared, and in a state of fear and tension, in which case a full fist going inside their yoni in labor is like unfathomable. And it's, I mean, this is what's done. It's totally nuts.
Really?
Yeah, this is what's called, I mean, God, the euphemisms just kill me. A cervical check is what it's called.
Okay.
Just checking. Just checking. No, it's a full fist inside the yoni, up through the cervix to see how open the woman is, which tells us nothing, by the way, about when the baby will be born.
I would have thought they had some sort of ultrasound kind of modeling device that can see all that without having to go manual,
No.
but they go full manual. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Multiple times, not just once.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like it's totally, and she's supposed to like enjoy this process. Like, of course not. Of course not. So I stopped teaching hypnobirthing because I thought, you know, this is at its worst promoting dissociative behavior in an environment that I think requires an alert state. But again, how will the baby be born in that like conscious beta alert state? It's not possible. And that's where women hover when they have epidurals. Their brain waves are in beta, right? They're alert. But the ideal state, you know, brain in terms of a brainwave state for giving birth would be like alpha theta.
Oh, and that would be meditative or
Yeah, like light trance or a deep trance.
okay, flow state of some sort.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are
And again,
there?
it just happens. It's the disturbances that make it not happen. So no woman needs to do anything to make this happen. It's the undoing. It's the peeling off. It's the, you know, that's yeah.
Yeah. Are there papers on or research on the distribution of postpartum depression between home birth and hospital birth?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have you investigated postpartum depression, dealt with that, have tools for that? And...
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like, don't get abused in pregnancy and birth.
Okay.
Like the whole, I mean, the pathology around postpartum depression, I think also is a kind of a cover up for the kind of systematic grooming that happens in pregnancy that leads up to the birth event. So personally, I have not supported a woman who had a holistic pregnancy. So with that, you know, or what's called a wild pregnancy, where she's opting out of, you know, the industrial birth system, then has an empowering ecstatic birth who then suffers postpartum. And I think if that were to happen, my question would be, you know, where was the family? Did she have support? Who was there? You know? So anecdotally, I can say that the women that I've supported who birth in their power have, it's a gift for their mothering journey. It's the starting point, the confidence building event, the adoration, you know, of the body event that, you know, really sets the bar high for kind of what can be after that. And that goes, you know, breastfeeding experiences too. I mean, I used to be a lactation counselor, and I only became that because all the women that I served needed so much help and had such horrible time breastfeeding. Those women also had traumatic births. And now that I've shifted in terms of who I support, in terms of what, you know, how they're giving birth, women have questions. It's not to say women don't have challenges, but it doesn't spiral into this kind of termination of breastfeeding altogether.
Yeah.
They're more open to creative solutions, and because they have a commitment and attachment to the baby in a way that I think, you know, industrialized birth seeks to destroy.
Wild pregnancies, that just stuck in my mind. Is that what they call them? That's great.
So this is a term coined by Yolanda Norris Clark, who I mentioned is one of my mentors, is the mother of 9 and just a brilliant,
Yeah.
Courageous, just funny, amazing woman. But yeah, she coined the term
You said that
wild
she's
pregnancy.
your or was your mentor. Does she offers workshops and books and stuff like that?
So she co-teaches a program that I did called the Radical Birthkeeper School. So Emily Saldea, who owns and runs the Free Birth Society, and Yolanda Norris Clark co-teach this program called the Radical Birthkeeper School. And that is a program for kind of former hospital doulas, even some licensed midwives who are just kind of sick of the limitations of their licensing,
Mm-hmm.
who want to serve women in their integrity and be loyal to women outside of the confines of they can and can't say, do and cannot do. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I think it's the only program that doesn't erase women. Like, I don't know any other birth programs who are teaching similar ideas, like at least in North America, that
Straight from the redesigned language that is occurring. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, their program, it sets them apart, I mean, for a number of reasons, but that one stands out to me too. It's just so rare.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So a year ago, you started your channel. Did we speak right before or right when you started?
I had started it. I
Yeah.
had started it. I had started it. Yeah.
How has that gone? How has that developed for you?
It's been amazing. I just get to learn from women that I love all the time. And it's so rewarding to be able to be the resource that women will go to
Mm-hmm.
to learn or to send to their friends, like to pique their friends. I just love that they can, before they find the words to explain or to articulate what is wrong or where their concerns are with whether it's trans ideology, porn, and prostitution, that they can kind of send their friends to my channel and say, listen, like, watch this interview or check out this post or whatever. So I've really prided myself on the utility aspect of what the channel is, which is what I had, through my peaking. I think, thank God, Feminist Current was, up and running, and I just remember just freaking out, listening to those interviews, and yeah, and then something that Joey Bright put together, the "Can I Get a Witness," which was like a 17-hour marathon event. That was the summer of 2020, and that just blew my mind, and I just felt so grateful for access to hear all those people speak. So yeah, it's going well. And
do you have a sense of is there a theme, or I guess the topics of TPP and trans porn and prostitution, but you're also talking about pregnancy too. I'm wondering, do you have as you go forward, do you have a plan to kind of explore this area, or are you just kind of naturally, organically just following your gut?
I'm curious. I'm interested in talking more about. I'm going to be doing an episode on my binge eating journey and healing that and moving through that. But I'm really interested in the kind of mind control and the body control aspects of the lives of women and girls, in modern society. And so I kind of go I kind of bounce around. But what's been interesting, and I know, this is how I emailed you for the last interview. I'm like, I have the story. Can I come on your channel? And that's also what has been happening from time to time here. So the content kind of creates itself, and that women come up with ideas, or they recommend things to, topics for me to cover. And so that's been really interesting. I'm interviewing a woman on Monday who wants to tell her story of why she, they, them'd her baby, and then ultimately why she stopped. And kind of being caught up in all of that. And I know her in person, actually, and she came up to me kind of out and about locally, and she was like, "You piqued me." And I was like, this is the best feeling in the world.
I
I
no
used to
longer
name
have
them
a
my
baby,
baby.
thanks to you. It's like you're the godmother or something.
It's
Get
just
away.
epic. I'm like that. This is like my love language. Someone saying that that I piqued them and that they no longer they them their baby. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, and this isn't because I want to be like some ideological warrior, like
Yeah.
winner here. This is because this, as you know, like literally translates into her kid not mutilating their body. I mean, these are like the material consequences of piquing people on the harms of trans ideology. Is we are, mitigating or eliminating the chance that these kids will cut their dicks off and cut their breasts off. It's wild. So that's the. I mean, my ego is like, of course, yes, I piqued her. But the consequences of sharing this information. So yeah, I would say it's just consciousness raising is, I think, what I like doing.
And then you have a practice. It sounds like several practices that you purvey, so people can find you. And you work remotely as well as locally, so people
Yes.
can. So what kind of resources do you do on your other stuff? And also mention your channel name so people can hear it.
Sure. It's called Whose Body Is It? Yeah. And that is my name across platforms. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. That's my Instagram handle. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I talk to a lot of women on Instagram.
Okay. Is that
I have a Twitter,
a good
but it's scary.
Oh yeah.
So
Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. I just try to avoid at all costs. Yeah, I don't get involved. Yeah, Instagram is how I started off talking about birth there and then shifted. I love the lives. I know you go live on YouTube, but I haven't done that. I do the lives on Instagram. And there's something about it that feels intimate. Whereas Twitter just feels like I'm so exposed, it's like you're exposed. There's something about this.
I feel the exact opposite. Like I can hide behind clever sentences, but like photographs, like that's a little too exposed. Or on Instagram.
That's funny. That's really funny. Yeah.
How our brains work.
Yeah.
Our personalities.
That's really funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird thing to get comfortable talking to your face in the phone. Like that's what like Instagram stories are.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to be comfortable doing, but I do feel comfortable doing it. But it's weird. Yeah, it's totally weird. And then so I do coaching online for women who are, wanting to practice their voice, communicate effectively, stop getting triggered all the time, taking things less personally. That is in my tagline, Benjamin. Yeah. Really? Okay. Cultivating resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I used to just get so up in arms all the time about every little thing. And
why is that important for people to not be triggered? Why is it important? For the people in the back.
Well, this is not about elimination, but I think reducing the frequency and the duration that we stay in that space.
Okay.
Whether that's fear, anger, frustration, naming it, like moving through it. That's the goal, not to become apathetic or to not care.
Yeah.
And to find a way to do something about it. So moving towards the creation or building, whether that's forming a committee with parents or coming up with a game plan to speak to your children or saying taking them out of a school or switching schools or whatever it is, rather than constantly feeling at the effect of the craziness, because it is bad. I'm not, I'm not doing the spiritual bypass, stuff that just don't think about it. Have a glass of wine, just forget about it. It's not that bad. Why do you care? Women come up, they tell me a lot. They're like, their partners get sick of hearing them talk about it. And one of the questions that comes up is, why do you care so much? Right. well, we care because we care about humanity and
But
we
it's
want to
also
see better
important to
things.
care properly or care productively, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it, you know? That's one way to think about it. And like rage is important. Rage is really important. And I think women especially have a hard time feeling, we have a hard time feeling our rage.
Hmm.
Yeah. So resilience training, confidence building, and then addressing the vicious thought patterns
Hmm.
that hold us back from really like being in our lane of brilliance and genius and creation. You know, I wouldn't be able to be like at this level of function had I not stopped binge eating, had I still had like 80% of my thoughts be about binging and or you know restriction. It couldn't be. um I honestly feel that way about grooming too. Like as soon as I stopped wearing makeup and blow drying my hair and removing body hair, I just have more time to think other thoughts, to do other things. Now, that doesn't mean I don't ritualistically take care of my body. It's just a totally different
Hmm.
relationship, and kind of the time that's spent is just it's just different. So I think about that often too. Like, what would you do if like 15 to 30 more minutes a day? That's wild. That's that's valuable time. It's really valuable time.
I've gotten in trouble for complimenting a woman on her looks, but because you brought it up, it looks like it works for you.
Thank you. And I want to share, like, in that regard, I've never felt more vital and more beautiful than when I stopped wearing makeup and had unlimited like sun exposure.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm obsessed with I'm gonna out myself as a not proud non-sunscreen wearing person.
but isn't there a name for that? The people who are addicted.
An anti sunscreener.
I thought I grew up in California. There were these people who were addicted to laying in the sun. They even had a name. I can't remember what the name was.
Sun worshiper.
Yeah, maybe sun worshiper.
Yeah, but it's the most nourishing food. Really it has been the sun, and
Hmm.
yeah. So that's my secret. Saying what you mean, laying in the sun, and ditching the toxic mush.
Do you have any merch? Do you sell sweaters or Afghans? With whose
I
body
sell
is it?
stickers.
Okay, you got stickers.
I sell stickers. Yeah, I have 4 different stickers, and those are available on my website.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to link everybody to your work and your various sites so that they can be exposed to your son. Isabella, thank you for joining me again. It was really pleasant to catch up.
Thank you so much for having me on.